It's a scene straight out of a modern American thriller. The President of the United States, standing behind the iconic White House podium, is asked a question that could shake the foundations of justice and celebrity culture alike. Would Donald Trump consider pardoning Sean "Diddy" Combs, the billionaire hip-hop mogul now facing explosive charges of racketeering and sex trafficking? The room falls silent. Flashes burst. The stakes? Not just one man's fate, but the very credibility of the U.S. justice system and the boundaries of presidential power. Could one signature from a sitting president erase years of alleged abuse, criminal enterprise, and public outrage? How did we reach a point where the legal fate of a legendary music icon might hinge on the whims of a reality TV star-turned-world leader? And if Trump did issue this pardon, what would it reveal about American justice, culture, and politics in 2025? Stay tuned, because this story is far deeper and more disturbing than it first appears. Let's rewind. To understand this legal and cultural earthquake, we need to look back at Diddy's rise, Trump's presidential powers, and why this trial is such a flashpoint for the nation. Sean Combs, known variously as Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, or just Diddy, is not just a star, he's a phenomenon. Rising from the streets of New York City, he transformed hip-hop, elevated artists like the notorious B.I.G. and Mary J. Blige to superstardom, and amassed a fortune that soared into the billions. For decades, he embodied the American dream: hustle, reinvention, relentless ascent. But beneath the polished surface, stories circulated, whispers of volatile temper, lavish parties, and troubling behavior. For many, Diddy was untouchable, a bold, creative force who could outmaneuver rivals and lawsuits alike, until the fall of 2024. That's when it all changed. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan dropped a bombshell, a sweeping indictment charging Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and the transportation of victims across state lines to engage in prostitution. His arrest made global headlines. Suddenly, the myth of invincibility was shattered. Testimonies during the sensational trial have only deepened the shock. 2 women alleged Diddy raped them. Witnesses, among them rapper Kid Cudi and pop singer Dawn Richard, painted a picture of coercion, violence, and a hidden world of so-called freak-offs, drug-fueled sex parties involving both men and women. Civil lawsuits piled on, accusing Diddy not just of personal misconduct, but of orchestrating a sprawling criminal enterprise. As the trial entered its 13th day, the Bad Boy Records founders' defense team insisted the encounters were consensual. Their argument? That the women were seeking money, fame, or revenge. But the weight of testimony has left Diddy's reputation in tatters and threatened to end his career and his freedom for good. Why does this case matter so much? Because it's not just about Diddy. It's about whether the powerful can evade consequences for the most serious crimes. It's about the #MeToo movement and whether reforms are real or if celebrity and wealth can still buy impunity. And it's about America's crisis of trust in both justice and leadership. Into this firestorm stepped Donald Trump. No stranger to headlines or controversy, the former president's comments ignited a new round of debate. When asked if he'd consider a pardon, Trump didn't rule it out. He quipped, "Nobody's asked. You had to be the one to ask, Peter." I think some people have been very close to asking. First, I'd look at what's happening, and I haven't been watching it too closely, though it's certainly getting a lot of coverage. On the surface, it was classic Trump, deflecting, playful, calculating. But to millions watching, it raised a chilling question. Could the president really pardon a figure as polarizing as Diddy before a verdict has even been reached? And if so, what would that mean for the very idea of justice in the U.S.? To answer that, we need to examine the roots and reach of presidential pardon power. The U.S. Constitution grants the president sweeping authority to pardon or commute sentences in federal criminal cases. Article 2, Section 2 states, "He shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment." That's it. Simple, broad, no need for approval, no mechanism for review. But there are limits and deep controversy. A presidential pardon only applies to federal crimes. It cannot touch state-level prosecutions or civil lawsuits. In Diddy's case, even if Trump granted a pardon, state charges or civil claims could still proceed. As legal scholar Alan Dershowitz points out, a pardon in this case would be highly unusual before a conviction and would face intense scrutiny. The political cost could be significant, especially given the current climate surrounding sexual abuse allegations. This isn't just theory, it's history. Most presidents wait until late in their terms to grant pardons, wary of backlash. Even Richard Nixon's pardon, issued by Gerald Ford in 1974 after Watergate, sparked outrage and debate. Trump, however, has made a habit of using pardon power more aggressively, from controversial allies to celebrities, but never, until now, on someone accused of such grave, ongoing offenses. Former federal prosecutor Barbara McQuaid says, "While the president has broad pardon power, using it in a case like this would undermine the justice system and send a terrible message about accountability for serious crimes. It would be seen as a misuse of power for personal or political reasons." For victims' advocates, the prospect is even more dire. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children warns, "A pardon in a sex trafficking case, regardless of the individual involved, could have a chilling effect on victims coming forward and seeking justice. It is crucial that these crimes are taken seriously and that those responsible are held accountable." Let that sink in. One political gesture, one pardon, could rip through the entire system designed to protect the vulnerable. The world would be watching. What would a presidential pardon say to other victims, to other celebrities under investigation, to future prosecutors debating whether to take on powerful figures? And then there's the question of motivation. Why would Trump even consider such a move? Is it lingering friendship from their days in the New York limelight? A desire to capture headlines and dominate the news cycle? Or is it a calculated ploy to win support from new voter demographics by showing mercy to a fallen star? Each option brings its own set of consequences and scandals. On social media, the debate is boiling. Supporters of Diddy insist he's being targeted because of his wealth and race. Others argue that justice must be blind, and no amount of fame should shield someone from accountability. Within the legal community, there's a growing sense of alarm. What if presidents begin to routinely pardon celebrities and cronies, sending the message that connections matter more than the law? Already, the Diddy case has exposed the frailties of America's justice system. Years of rumors went unheeded. Victims faced an uphill climb to be believed. Only after public outcry and the momentum of #MeToo did prosecutors act. Now, even as testimony continues in a packed New York City courtroom, the specter of a presidential pardon threatens to overshadow the entire process. And for Diddy himself, the stakes could not be higher. If convicted, he faces life in prison. His empire, built on image and influence, hangs by a thread. But if Trump intervenes, everything changes, in ways that go far beyond one man or even one criminal case. It's not just a legal drama, it's a test for the meaning of presidential power in the digital age. If the president can erase federal charges with a flick of the pen, where does accountability begin? Where does it end? Now, the question that haunts courtrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms across the nation: will Trump actually go through with it? Does he dare to risk the fury of survivors, the outrage of voters, and the censure of history itself to protect a controversial friend? As the world waits and speculation intensifies, one thing is clear. Whatever happens next will send shockwaves through not just American justice, but through the fabric of celebrity culture, politics, and the very concept of accountability itself. But what if the real danger isn't just the pardon itself, but how it could reshape every future trial involving power and fame? We're about to dig even deeper into the political calculations, possible fallout, and the hidden connections that could shape the outcome of the Diddy case and change the rules of American justice forever. As the trial barrels forward and headlines swirl, the nation hangs on what could be one of the most explosive White House decisions in recent memory. The question is no longer just whether Sean Diddy Combs will be found guilty. It's whether the very concept of justice is up for grabs at the highest level. And the eyes of the world are fixated on Donald Trump's next move. Let's explore what could happen if Trump were to use his presidential pardon power in Diddy's case. First, understand the gravity. We're talking about historic legal ground. No president has ever preemptively pardoned someone accused, rather than convicted, of charges as serious and inflammatory as sex trafficking and racketeering. Legal scholars like Alan Dershowitz warn, a pardon in this case would be highly unusual before a conviction and would face intense scrutiny. So, what would the immediate consequences be? If Trump signs the pardon, the federal charges against Diddy could vanish in an instant. Diddy's high-powered lawyers would undoubtedly file to dismiss the federal case, but state prosecutors, especially in New York, could still pursue their own criminal charges, completely untouched by a federal pardon. The civil lawsuits, dozens of them, would rage on regardless, since no presidential signature can erase accountability in civil court. But the legal chessboard is only half the story. The bigger aftershock would ripple through our national psyche. Victim advocates warn that a pardon would shatter the already fragile trust survivors have in the system. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children put it bluntly: a pardon in a sex trafficking case, regardless of the individual involved, could have a chilling effect on victims coming forward and seeking justice. How many survivors would see the rich and powerful as untouchable after this? For the broader public, a Diddy pardon could ignite a cultural firestorm. Many would see it as a symbol that celebrity, money, and political connections trump even the gravest crimes. Conversations on talk shows, podcasts, and social media would quickly transcend partisanship, morphing into a national reckoning about privilege, immunity, and the two-tiered nature of American justice. On the world stage, America's stance on combating sex trafficking and upholding the rule of law could be irrevocably damaged. U.S. officials have long used the power of moral example and policy to urge other nations to prosecute traffickers and protect victims. If the president spares a wealthy celebrity facing such charges, the hypocrisy would be glaring. As one human rights advocate tweeted, "How can we demand justice abroad if we won't even serve it at home?" Of course, there are other paths. Trump himself admits he hasn't been following every detail, telling reporters, "First, I'd look at what's happening, and I haven't been watching it too closely, though it's certainly getting a lot of coverage." He also says no one has formally approached him to request a pardon yet, hinting that the process is far from over. Still, in an age when every tweet and soundbite carries the weight of policy, even Trump's casual remarks have global impact. But what about the political climate? Pardoning Diddy before a conviction would supercharge debates about the scope of presidential clemency. It could also backfire dramatically, especially among independent voters and women, two groups Trump needs in a tough election year. Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney, cautions, using the pardon power in a case like this would undermine the justice system and send a terrible message about accountability for serious crimes. It would be seen as a misuse of power for personal or political reasons. We also have to wonder about unintended consequences. Picture this. Years from now, future presidents or candidates could feel emboldened to wield the pardon as a political weapon or shield for influential friends. Already, legal experts are calling for reforms to limit or clarify the presidential pardon's reach. Could this be the scandal that finally pushes Congress to act? The music industry, already rocked by Me Too and years of misconduct scandals, would be forced into an existential reckoning. Labels and corporate partners, once quick to celebrate and sponsor Diddy, would have to choose sides in a storm of public outrage. Would they continue to work with accused celebrities, or finally draw the line? But here's the bigger, unsettling question. Why does this matter for you, the viewer? First, this saga is a real-time test of American values. It's not just about Diddy or Trump, it's about the rules that shape our society. If the powerful are above the law, what message does that send to ordinary people? The decision will set a precedent for how allegations of abuse, particularly against women and vulnerable minorities, are handled when fame and money are involved. Second, the case exposes the strengths and weaknesses of our justice system. We see that even when accused are rich and connected, the gears of federal and state justice can operate independently. Federal charges can be erased with a stroke of a pen, but state law and civil liability still loom. For victims, this means hope doesn't have to die with a presidential pardon, but it does make their fight much, much harder. Third, it's a wake-up call on the importance of civic engagement. Presidential power, including the power to pardon, is ultimately shaped by public scrutiny, protests, and the ballot box. Oversight matters. Calls for transparency and accountability are not just abstract ideals, they're the bedrock of democracy. And for anyone watching who feels powerless against the machinery of influence, remember, every outrage, every civil case, every demand for honesty chips away at that myth. Social movements, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, survivor advocacy groups, prove that pressure works, even if change feels slow. This moment is part of a larger struggle for fairness in America. So, will Trump actually pardon Sean Diddy Combs? Right now, all the signs point to uncertainty. Trump has said he'll look at the facts, but experts agree a preemptive pardon would be unprecedented and carry massive political and cultural costs. There's been no formal request, and Trump has distanced himself from Diddy since their celebrity apprentice days. The legal machinery is grinding forward, with the outcome of the federal trial, looming state cases, and mountains of civil suits still unresolved. What is certain is this: power and celebrity are being put on trial, right alongside Diddy himself. The country is watching not just for a verdict, but for a sign. Will accountability win out, or will another powerful man escape the reach of justice? And here's the secret fact few realize. Even if Trump issues a federal pardon, Diddy could still be hauled into state court the very next day. No president can shield anyone from state prosecution. That's the firewall built into the system, a safeguard many overlook in the media frenzy. So as this unfolds, don't tune out. Pay attention to the legal battle, not just the headlines. Ask questions, demand transparency, and vote for leaders who stand for equal justice. If you want a justice system that works for everyone, it starts with your voice and your vigilance. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell for more deep dives into the crossroads of fame, politics, and justice. Share your thoughts below. Do you think a president should ever pardon someone accused of such serious crimes? How do we ensure the justice